Okay, well done, and welcome to the final human geography session where we're going to look at resources and focus on energy. Okay, so we're going to explore the UK's energy mix and how and why that is changing, and the impact of that changing energy mix is having on the UK. And these are some key words students need to know. So energy mix, energy demand, and this idea of fracking, which we'll explore a bit later. So energy mix just basically means where do we get our energy from? So it's the combination of different energy sources used to meet the country's total energy consumption or energy demand. So in other words, are we using solar? Are we using coal, oil and gas? Okay, that's our energy mix. Energy demand just means how much we need, so the consumption of energy by human activity. And fracking is a process which involves the fracturing, which means breaking. If you fracture your arm, you break your arm, to release oil or gas. Okay, we call it shale gas, S-H-A-L-E, from under the ground. And it's very controversial, and we'll come back to that shortly. So just an overview here of how our energy mix is changing. I'm going to summarize this for you in a second, but again, students need to be aware of how to read bar charts like this. So I'd be looking at the colors. What do they mean? Look at the key, look at the axes. Okay, you've got the percentage along the side here. You've got the different types of energy mix along the bottom. So 1970, you can see that nearly half of our energy came from coal. And again, the other half was generally coming from oil, some natural gas as well, and a little bit of nuclear. Fast forward to 2014, so 44 years later, coal has considerably decreased. Oil has decreased a bit. Natural gas has massively increased, which is unbelievable considering how bad it is for the environment. Nuclear is also increasing. And here comes the renewable energies, wind, solar, and hydroelectric power, and this idea of bioenergy as well. So burning or degrading plants and things like that to create electricity. Okay, another graph, which is a very interesting type of graph, which basically says exactly the same thing. It's kind of look at it in chunks. You might want to start from a certain sort of period of time. And this is amount of electricity generated by a fuel source in terawatt hours. So again, just kind of think the bigger the sort of shape, the more that energy mix is getting to us using that source. So again, sort of before 2000, coal and oil was really sort of quite a big chunk there. What's that, about maybe 30% of it? But now as we fast forward to kind of modern day, tiny little percentage. Gas, again, hasn't changed loads, okay, hasn't changed loads, but it has overall increased. Nuclear, okay, nuclear is quite a big player as well now, but actually it does say here, so it's a bit of a contradiction to what we looked at just a minute ago, but there's a little bit less. Bioenergy is on the up and up. Hydroelectric power is forming quite a big chunk, and any other. So to summarize both those graphs, generally these are the key trends in the UK. Coal and oil is decreasing. Natural gas has actually increased. Renewables have definitely increased recently and are increasing more and more every year. And nuclear has also increased. Okay, so why is that happening? Coal and oil generally is a finite resource, which means it's going to run out. And so we've closed our coal mines because it's running out, but also because of our awareness on the impact it has on the climate. Okay, so the government is doing something about that in terms of restricting coal and oil. However, they are still exploiting natural gas, and that is because we have discovered large gas reserves in the North Sea, which we are owning as part of our exclusive economic zone, and therefore we have access to that, and we're using it to kind of meet the demand in this growing population. Okay, we all demand energy more and more as we're getting richer and there's more of us, and so we've got to fill that need, and we can't rely on importing it from places like Russia because of the conflict. We can't rely on importing oil from the Middle East because of conflict and cost, and the fact it's going to run out. So we are using our natural gas reserves, but again, really bad for the environment. We obviously are using renewables to counter that because we know that they are not going to run out. We have plenty of wind in this country, don't we? So we're going to harness that. And nuclear energy is basically quite reliable. It's very reliable, and it is generally carbon free. It's not renewable or non-renewable because there's aspects which are both, but it's definitely better than releasing greenhouse gases by burning coal, oil and gas. Okay, so again, I'm going to get you to pause this and make some notes here. This just basically says, where's it gone? Oh, yeah, okay, I'll come back to that. So wind and nuclear. Students need to know about the different types of energy mix and the pros and cons, the advantages and the disadvantages. Advantages of wind, generally it's renewable, it doesn't release carbon dioxide, and it's cheap once they're set up. But if there's no wind, there's no electricity, can have big environmental impacts on birds. A lot of birds die from wind farms, and a lot of sort of conflict with local residents and tourists. I live as part of the Jurassic Coast, and they wanted to build a big wind farm off the coast where millions of people come and visit every single year from all over the world to visit Durnell Door and Lulworth Cove and places like that. If you chuck in a big wind farm, people probably aren't going to come and visit. So they have put a stop to that now. Okay, but it is going to spoil that view, and it can really put off tourists. Nuclear, however, again, not too bad in terms of releasing carbon dioxide. It's very reliable, and again, once it's up and running, it's cheap energy. But it is a little bit unrenewable because it uses uranium, okay, a sort of chemical reaction of uranium, and that is a finite resource that is going to run out, okay, as a precious metal. It does cost a fortune to build nuclear power plants, £34 billion on average, and as we've seen from past experiences, it can be dangerous, okay. When the tsunami hit Fukushima in Japan, that caused radiation to leak. When we had Chernobyl as well, that was obviously a horrific disaster. And then when you finish with the nuclear power plant, you've got to store that radioactive waste, and that is extremely difficult to store. You know, there are places at Chernobyl which are, 50-meter walls, to try and contain that nuclear radioactive waste. Okay, so there's just some pros and cons there of wind and nuclear. This idea of fracking then, so we talked about fracking is where you basically drill down into the ground, you put some high pressured water and chemicals and grit and sand in there, which causes cracks to open up, and then the shale gas or oil can escape. That is what fracking is, but it's very controversial, okay. It's really bad for the environment. It can actually contaminate water supplies as well. A lot of people in America have got really ill because of fracking, and the sort of contaminants and the chemicals that are being used get leaked into those aquifers, those underground stores of water, and can contaminate water supplies. It can also cause mini earthquakes, okay, because you're messing with the bedrock, the ground. So not good. And because of that, Rishi Sunak, luckily, in the last couple of years, has reinstated the ban on fracking. So different governments come in, they keep sort of changing the rules because it will meet our energy demand. We've got lots of shale gas reserves to exploit, but the negatives do outweigh the positives on this one so far, and we have put a stop to it. But that's not to say it won't come back in the future under different governments. And then finally, before we finish, the last sort of question I want to show you and how I would tackle this is another one from a few years ago. In fact, I think it was maybe in last year. Study figures 10A and 10B. So 10A is a bar chart which shows the cost of producing electricity in the UK by source. So we've got coal, gas, wind, onshore and offshore. And then we've just got a sign. Figures come in all sorts. Sometimes it's text, sometimes it's a graph, a map, a photo. But the be all and end all is, guys, if you get a question which says refer to the figure, just refer to the figure, okay? Quote it, say what you see. Literally, if you don't use it, you're going to minimize your marks massively, okay? They're telling you to use it, so please use it. It's not just there to look at. You've got to quote it. You've got to use it. It's the biggest bit of advice I can give you. Figure 10A. So that clearly shows, doesn't it? Lots of coal and gas being quite expensive, and onshore wind being quite expensive as well. And this says, say no to 300-foot wind turbine in Seaton, okay, in Devon. And so it doesn't really give us much, does it? But we're going to have to use a bit of our own knowledge here as well. So the question says, oh, hang on, how do I move this? There we go. Study figures 10A and 10B. There are economic and environmental issues associated with the exploitation of energy sources. Use evidence from figure 10A and 10B to explain this statement. So no AO3 themes needed, just lots of connectors like therefore, this leads to. But again, it's 6 marks, so I'm thinking straight away. How many paragraphs? 2. one about this, one about that. And now I've got to decide how to structure it. So I've got economic and environmental. So I could do a paragraph about economic issues and environmental issues, but I've also got to include figure 10A and 10B. So it's up to you. But really, if this was a tick box, I'd be saying, right, I've got to do economic, environmental, 10A and 10B. And how that looks in 2 paragraphs is up to you. You could combine economic and 10A into one and do environmental and 10B into one. Okay, or you could do economic and environmental as one and then refer to the figures for your second paragraph. All right, so if I was looking at these figures here, I would probably do the first option. So I'd be saying, well, there are economic issues as seen in figure 10A, whereby extracting coal and gas is very expensive. This is bad because, okay, and I'd be saying, you know, coal, for example, costs, what's that, £90 per megawatt hour, which is extremely expensive. Yeah, therefore we should use potentially offshore wind, which is much cheaper. It's only £50 per hour. Second paragraph, I've got to do 10B and environmental. Well, that's lucky because I would say this is definitely going to easily give me some environmental points. So I'd say figure 10B clearly shows an offshore wind farm and a wind turbine on the ground. And it also has a sign saying that they shouldn't build this. And this is probably because it has environmental impacts, like it kills many bird species each year. Okay, it also has economic negatives in which it's very expensive to set up, but it's cheaper once it gets going. Okay, so you can see I have combined all 4 of those things in my 2 paragraphs. Okay, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this course. If you did, give us a big sort of comment or review on the geography page, or get your parents to do that. That will go a really long way. And yeah, if you want to get in contact, just drop me a message. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. It's been a pleasure teaching you and helping you revise, and I'm sure we'll meet again. Take care.